Section 6.2 is on rotations, and when we're rotating, we're going to rotate around a point, and we are not going to be changing the shape or the size of the object that we're rotating. A couple of vocabulary words that we have for rotation is center of rotation, and this is the point that we're rotating about. And then we also have the angle of rotation, and this is how far we are rotating the shape. So these are just the two vocabulary words that are new for this section. So for example, if we were to take this shape, we are going to draw a 150-degree rotation. And if it doesn't give us a direction, we're always going to go counterclockwise. So, for example, we have this shape here, and we are going to go 150 degrees counterclockwise. And that's where our new point B is going to be. We're going to label that B prime. And we would do sort of the same thing for our other shapes. Sorry, not our other shapes, our other points. So we're going to go 150 degrees for point A, and that is where A prime would be. And then we would do the same thing for point C. When we're doing this on the quiz or test, there's going to be a coordinate grid, so we aren't going to have to estimate as much as we are here. And that's where our rotation would be, and we went counterclockwise for this one. So because on the quiz and the test, because we're going to have coordinate grids, we're just going to skip this checkpoint for now. Now, if you want, we can do the coordinate point rules, and there's a little bit of an error on here. This one is supposed to be B, negative A. So a way that I remember this is each one has an A and a B. Or, for example, if we're using our X and Y coordinate points, we would have X, Y in our first plane or first coordinate, and then we also have X, Y in the one across from it. The other two, we are going to reverse the order, and we're going to do Y, X. And then we're going to add in some negative signs. So the way that I remember it, there's no or none negatives in the first quadrant. The first part is negative in the second quadrant. Both are negative in the third quadrant. And then the second is negative in the fourth. So it goes none first, both second. And those are the rules that we can use for our rotations. So let's use this in an example. We're going to graph the quadrilateral KLMN with the vertices given. Then we're going to rotate it 270 degrees about the origin. So let's start by plotting these points. We have K at 3, 2, L at 4, 2, and then we have M at 4, negative 3, and N at 2, negative 1. So we're going to rotate this 270 degrees about the origin. And this did not give us a direction, so we are going to go counterclockwise. So that would be towards the left. So what we're going to do with these coordinate points is first we're going to see where they are. And we remember our coordinate rules. We have our x and y coordinate points, and then yx, yx. And then we add in our negatives. None first, both second. So if you look, K and L are both in the first quadrant with x and y. So we know K is 3, 2. So that's our x and our y coordinates. And L is 4, 2. And again, for this point, that is also our x and our y. We're going to rotate this 270 degrees. So if we go to the next quadrant, that would be 90 degrees. The one below that would be 180 degrees. So we're going to go all the way to quadrant 4, where it's going to be 270 degrees. So for K prime, we need to use y, comma, negative x. So we know from our previous step that y was equal to 2, so we're going to start with 2, comma, and x was equal to 3, so negative x would be negative 3. And then we can go ahead and plot that point, 2, negative 3, and that will be labeled K prime. L started in the same quadrant, so we're going to do the same thing. L prime is also going to be a y, negative x. So our y value was 2, so our new coordinate point is going to be 2, negative 4. And if using the rules are too confusing, you can also use patty paper, like we went over in class. And if you weren't here for that, we can always go over it when you get back. So now we have K prime and L prime. We are going to next look at N and M. So these are both in the fourth quadrant. 2, negative 1, and M was 4, negative 3. So these are in the fourth quadrant, which we know are the y's, comma, negative x. So we know where y and we know negative x. And again, we're going to take this 270 degrees. So from this bottom quadrant going up, this would be going 90 degrees, 180 degrees, and then 270 degrees. So it matters where you start for where you are going to go. So as we're rotating this, we are going to this quadrant where we want N prime to be negative x, negative y. So we already know what negative x is. We know that's negative 1. And we know y is 2. So to make it negative y, we're just going to add a negative sign. So N prime is going to go to negative 1, negative 2. Then we can do the same thing with M. We are going to the same place. So M prime we know is going to be negative x, negative y. And we already know that negative x is equal to negative 3. So we just need to make our y negative. So negative 4. And that would be M prime. Then once you have rotated your 4 points, you can go ahead and draw your shape. So you can either use your rules or you can use your patty paper to rotate your images. It all depends on what is easiest for you. Okay. So example 2, we're going to graph the same quadrilateral from the previous previous example, and then we're going to rotate it 90 degrees about the origin. So let's start with our same coordinate points. K was at 3, 2. L was at 4, 2. N was at 2, negative 1. And M M was at 4, -3. So you can go ahead, connect those points. And this time we're going to rotate it 90 degrees about the origin. If we write in our rules again, we know we have x, y, y, x, x, y, and then y, x. And if we add in our negatives, it's none, first, both, and second. So we're going to rotate this 90 degrees. K and L are both in the first part, so K was at 3, 2, L was at 4, 2. And we're going to rotate this 90 degrees, so we're just going to be going over one spot to -y, x. Oops. So we know from the first quadrant this is x and y. So we just need to fill in what our prime values will be. So go ahead and do that, and then once you have your answers, press play to see if you did it correctly. So your correct answers, y was equal to 2, so -y would be -2, and x was 3. And then for L prime, it should have been -2, 4. So you should have these plotted on your graph and labeled. And -2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oops. Oops. Sorry about that. All right. So now we're going to do the same thing for our other two. These ones started down here, and we need to go up 90 degrees. So to do that, we're going to x, y. So why don't you try these two on your own, and then once you have your answers, you can press play to check them. So coordinate point N was 2, -1. M was 4, -3. These ones were in the fourth quadrant. So for these ones, we have y, -x for both of them. And we need to change it, so it's going to xy for both of them. So for n prime x, -x is -1, so x will just be 1. And y is still going to be 2. So that one is at 1, 2 for n prime. For m prime, x would be 3 and y would be 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that is where your final shape should be. And again, you could either do this using the rules, or if you prefer, you can do patty paper. Both would be allowed on the test for you to use. All right, we just have a couple more things to go over. The next one is a rotation theorem, and this one is a rotation is isometry, which basically that just means the size of the shape does not change. And that means that the shapes are congruent to each other. So knowing that, we can solve different problems. So the quadrilateral is rotated about point P. They want us to find the value of y. So to do that, we're going to start marking congruent parts. So this line, as we would rotate it, it would go to the back of the same shape over there. So we know that this segment is congruent to that segment. And since they are congruent, we can set up an equation with that. So we know 3x plus 1 equals 7y. This equation, however, has more than one variable. So we're going to have to set up a few more equations to figure out what x equals. And this top shape touching the blue line is equal to 4, but there is no value given on the second shape of what that side length would be, so that's not very helpful to us. Then at the bottom side of the blue line, we know that side length is equal to 6, and in the rotated shape, that is equal to 3x. So we can set up an equation with those. So we know 6 is equal to 3x. That gives us enough information to solve for x by dividing both sides by 3. And we would get x equal to 2. Then we can take that and plug it in and solve for y. So why don't you pause the video, solve for y, and then press play to check your answer. So you should have plugged in 2 for x to set that equal to 7y. And when you're solving, you would have got 6 plus 1 equals 7y. 7 equals 7y. And then when we divide both sides by 7, we would get y equals 1. And that is what we were asked to solve for. So using that information, go ahead and attempt checkpoint 4 on your own. And once you're done, click play to see if you got the correct answer. Okay, so in this one, this 4b would line up with the 2a plus 6. So that is the first equation that I could set up. Oh, sorry, that just jumped around. So 4b equals 2a plus 6. And some other information, we know this 3b is congruent to that side, which doesn't really help us because there's no information there. So then if we go, we know this side length here is 15, which would leave that other side length to be equal to 3a. So when we set up that equation, we know 3a equals 15. This equation only has one variable, so that's the one I'm going to solve for first. And we would divide both sides by 3 to get a equals 5. We would then plug that in for a over here. And when you go ahead and solve the right side, you would get 10 plus 6, which is 16. And you should have divided both sides by 4 then, which would give us that b is equal to 4. All right, so that's everything, all the notes that you're going to need for this section. Go ahead and do the homework and then let me know if you have any questions.